Picture this. You stop replying immediately. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing, correcting, proving, persuading, and suddenly, the world leans in. People who barely noticed you before begin to watch you more closely. Those who once felt certain about you now feel unsettled. Attention shifts. Dynamics change. What you withhold starts to matter more than what you offer. This isn't confidence. This isn't indifference. This is detachment. And Machiavelli understood its power centuries before psychology gave it a name. Most people believe power comes from effort, more talking, more presence, more emotional availability, more engagement. But Machiavelli observed the opposite. He saw that the person who needs least controls most, that the one who is hardest to reach becomes the one others chase, and that dependence, emotional, social, psychological, is the easiest lever to pull if you want to control someone. Detachment isn't coldness. It isn't cruelty. It's strategic distance. Jung would later describe this as the moment a person withdraws their emotional center from the collective and anchors it within themselves. Schopenhauer saw it as a sign of inner richness, the ability to stand alone without begging the world to fill you. Kafka lived it, painfully, as the awareness that distance changes how the world treats you, sometimes with fascination, sometimes with fear. And here's the truth most people never hear. The more you chase approval, affection, recognition, or certainty, the less valuable you become in the eyes of others. But when you master detachment, the roles reverse. In this video, you're going to learn Machiavelli's code of detachment, not as a manipulative trick, but as a psychological framework. You'll understand why emotional distance creates gravity, how withdrawing your need rewires power dynamics, and why the person who can walk away calmly often becomes the one everyone else follows. This is not about disappearing. It's about becoming unmovable. Welcome to Psycrypt. Let's decode why detachment makes the world chase you. There is a brutal truth at the core of every human interaction, one Machiavelli understood with unsettling clarity. Whoever needs more loses. Most people don't realize how much of their behavior is driven by quiet desperation. The need to be liked, the need to be chosen, the need to be reassured, the need to matter. These needs leak out in subtle ways. Over-explaining, over-giving, over-texting, overreacting, over-performing, and every leak broadcasts the same message to the world: I am dependent. Machiavelli observed that power dynamics are never neutral. They are always asymmetrical. Someone is chasing stability, someone else is providing it. Someone is seeking certainty, someone else controls access to it. The moment you emotionally invest more than the other party, the balance tilts. Not because the other person is cruel, but because human psychology responds instinctively to leverage. This is why detachment feels threatening. It removes leverage. Jung would describe neediness as a misplaced emotional center. Instead of being rooted in the self, it's scattered across people, outcomes, validation, and imagined futures. When your emotional stability depends on someone else's response, silence becomes torture, delay becomes anxiety, distance becomes rejection, and the other person, consciously or unconsciously, senses this power. Schopenhauer went even further. He believed that the more fragile a person's inner world is, the more they rely on constant external stimulation. Approval becomes a substitute for self-knowledge. Attention replaces inner depth, and the louder someone reaches for connection, the more transparent their dependency becomes. This is the paradox Machiavelli saw long before modern psychology. The pursuit of closeness often creates distance. The harder you try to secure someone's affection, loyalty, or attention, the more you signal that losing it would destabilize you. And instability invites dominance. Detachment disrupts this entire mechanism. When you stop needing immediate responses, you remove emotional hooks. When you stop chasing reassurance, you remove pressure. When you stop orienting your behavior around outcomes you can't control, you become psychologically self-contained. And the moment that happens, others begin to feel it, not as hostility, but as absence. An absence they can't fill, an absence that unsettles them. Kafka captured this tension painfully well. His characters often exist just outside the systems that seek to define them. Not fully rejected, not fully accepted, but unreachable. And it's that distance that gives them weight. The world keeps circling them, trying to assign meaning, trying to extract clarity. This is the first law of detachment. The less you need to be chosen, the more choice gravitates toward you, not because people are shallow, but because power follows stability, and stability belongs to the one who can stand without leaning. In the next act, we'll examine how Machiavelli transformed detachment from a personal discipline into a strategy, and why emotional withdrawal doesn't weaken your influence, but multiplies it. Machiavelli never confused power with aggression. In fact, one of his most unsettling insights was this: the most effective form of control often comes from absence, not force. Those who constantly assert themselves expose their intentions. Those who withdraw strategically create uncertainty, and uncertainty is where influence is born. Most people believe engagement equals strength. They argue more to prove dominance. They explain more to maintain relevance. They react faster to assert presence. But Machiavelli saw that visibility can become a liability. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to manage. The more you react on cue, the easier you are to steer. Detachment breaks predictability. When you don't rush to respond, people begin to read into your silence. When you don't react emotionally, they question their leverage. When you don't clarify your position immediately, others project possibilities. And projection is power's silent ally. The mind hates uncertainty. It will work harder to resolve it than it ever will to pursue something obvious. This is why Machiavelli advised rulers to reveal little, not because secrecy is virtuous, but because information asymmetry creates control. The one who knows more than they reveal dictates the pace. The one who reveals everything gives the other side a map. Jung would interpret this through the lens of projection. When you withdraw emotionally, you create a psychological vacuum. Others fill that vacuum with their fears, hopes, insecurities, and desires. They begin to imagine your intentions. They attribute meaning to your restraint, and often they assign you far more power than you ever claimed. Detachment, then, is not passivity. It is strategic opacity. Schopenhauer believed that those with deep inner lives naturally speak less, not because they have nothing to say, but because they are not compelled to externalize themselves for validation. Their restraint is not calculated, it's instinctive. And this instinct, Machiavelli understood, is precisely what creates authority. People trust those who don't seem desperate to be trusted. When you stop trying to secure outcomes, others become aware of the imbalance. They start adjusting their behavior. They become cautious. They seek reassurance from you instead. The chase reverses, not because you demanded attention, but because you removed your dependence on it. Machiavelli knew that power does not come from convincing others of your worth. It comes from making your approval non-essential to your survival, and therefore valuable. The moment you demonstrate that you can walk away calmly, without resentment or spectacle, you introduce a threat more powerful than confrontation: irrelevance. And people will do almost anything to avoid being irrelevant. In the next act, we'll explore how detachment reshapes identity itself, how Jung's individuation, Schopenhauer's solitude, and Kafka's distance converge into a mindset that doesn't just attract attention, but commands it without effort. There's a moment, subtle and almost invisible, when detachment stops being a tactic and becomes an identity. At this point, you're no longer withdrawing to gain leverage. You are simply unavailable to manipulation, and that changes everything. Jung called this individuation, the separation of inner authority from the collective. When your emotional center is no longer scattered across people, outcomes, or approval, you stop orbiting the world begins orbiting you. This is where detachment becomes gravity. Kafka lived inside this tension. His characters are often distant, not through rebellion, but through opacity. They cannot be easily categorized. They do not respond in expected ways. And because systems rely on predictability, the undefined becomes threatening. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. A ruler who is too accessible becomes familiar. Familiarity breeds predictability. Predictability invites challenge. Detachment preserves mystique. It allows presence without surrender and influence without exposure. This is why emotionally detached individuals appear calm under pressure. They are not suppressing emotion. They are not governed by it. They don't chase reassurance. They don't escalate conflict to protect ego. They don't scramble to repair every silence. Their restraint communicates stability, and stability is magnetic. People begin to lean toward them, not because they demand attention, but because they don't need it. Conversations shift, dynamics soften. Others become more careful with their words, more aware of their behavior, not out of fear, but recognition. This person cannot be moved easily. Detachment, at this stage, is no longer withdrawal. It is sovereignty. You stop explaining, you stop chasing, you stop reacting on cue, and quietly, you declare something most people never do. I belong to myself first. But here is where most people misunderstand detachment, and where many fail. Because reaching this state once is not enough. To hold this gravity, detachment must be maintained without bitterness, without performance, and without the need to be noticed. And that brings us to the next layer, the discipline required to remain detached without collapsing back into need. There is something Machiavelli understood that most people miss when they talk about detachment. Power is not created in the moment you withdraw. It is created in the moments you do not return. Anyone can go silent once. Anyone can pull back when wounded. Anyone can appear detached for a short time. But most people fail to maintain it. They withdraw, but hope to be noticed withdrawing. They detach, but wait for someone to chase. They create distance, but measure whether it's working. That is not detachment. That is delayed dependency. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately. The moment your silence is meant to provoke a reaction, you are still reacting, just indirectly. True detachment is not a tactic. It is non-negotiable absence. It does not announce itself. It does not explain. It does not signal superiority or loss. It simply removes availability. Jung would describe this as the hardest stage of individuation, the willingness to be misunderstood without correcting the record. Most people cannot tolerate this. The ego wants clarity. It wants recognition. It wants to be seen accurately. But the detached mind resists this urge because it understands that overclarification is another form of dependence. Schopenhauer believed that the capacity to endure being misread was one of the strongest signs of inner depth. Shallow minds need immediate understanding. Deep minds are willing to stand alone with their truth, even if the world never fully aligns with it. But here is the hidden advantage. When you stop explaining yourself, people begin explaining you to themselves. When you stop correcting assumptions, projection takes over. When you stop managing perception, others reveal their own psychology. Detachment becomes a filter. Those who relied on access fade away. Those who fed on reaction lose interest. Those who needed emotional leverage find nothing to grip. And the ones who remain, quietly, cautiously, are those who sense something rare, stability that cannot be negotiated. This is how detachment reshapes the social field around you, not immediately, not dramatically, but permanently. People adjust their tone. They approach more carefully. They hesitate before testing boundaries. They begin to respect distance they cannot breach. Over time, your absence becomes heavier than your presence ever was. You are no longer available on demand. You are no longer reactive on cue. You are no longer emotionally governable. And when this state becomes consistent, calm, quiet, unperformative, you cross a threshold most people never reach. Detachment stops being something you do. It becomes how you exist. And once that happens, the world no longer asks whether you matter. It begins to behave as if you already do. So here is the truth, laid bare. The world is not moved by intensity. It is not impressed by effort. And it is not controlled by those who chase it. It is shaped by those who do not need it. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology put language to it. Jung would describe this as the psyche returning to itself, no longer scattered across approval, reaction, or external validation. Schopenhauer saw detachment as the natural state of a deep mind, one rich enough internally that it does not beg for stimulation or reassurance. But all of them pointed toward the same conclusion. The one who needs least becomes the one others revolve around. Detachment does not make you cold. It makes you ungovernable. You stop chasing clarity. You stop repairing silence. You stop reacting to every emotional invitation. And in doing so, you remove the lever others once used to move you. This is not about disappearing from life. It is about standing so firmly within yourself that the world must adjust its approach. If this video resonated, If it felt like it articulated something you've lived but never named, then you already understand what detachment really is. It isn't distance from others, it's closeness to yourself. This is Psycrypt, where dark psychology meets philosophy, where depth replaces noise, and where inner sovereignty becomes power. If you want more content like this, subscribe to the channel, and when you're ready to continue this path, watch How to Become Emotionally Untouchable, The Anatomy of a Cold Mind. It completes the framework we've built here. Until next time, stay detached, stay grounded, and let the world do the chasing.